a landscape architecture major, the senior project is damn hard work. Unlike other majors, we research, survey, design, experiment, build, document, review, and revise, and all these processes must happen simultaneously and in no particular order. On top of this, we somehow manage to fit in our extracurricular work and interests, and they inevitably work their way into our main body of work. The senior project is a long and confusing process, and the path to the end is hardly a straight one.
Don't keep it all in your head. What we had was off.
While researching ways to creatively implement the use of projectors in a theatrical environment, I stumbled across this ad for Puma, done by acclaimed advertising agency Droga 5. What caught my eye was the set's ability to give an illusion of depth and perspective while shifting an atmosphere from environment to environment. I noticed that projections were still rough around the edges and stagehands were clearly visible throughout the performance, yet the eye seemed not to be distracted, and if anything, the exposure of the inner workings of the production made it even more engaging. I was especially attracted to this execution because of its capability to very clearly tell a story on a visual level. This ad for Puma Left became a springboard for the rest of winter quarter for me, and I became obsessed with unlocking its potential to implement in this year's production of RSVP. With further research, I began to brainstorm on different ways I could bring elements from Droga 5's ad into public and theatrical environments. However, with further research, I realized that pulling this off would be quite a technical feat. It requires many projectors strategically placed so that projected surfaces do not overlap, and a method of synchronizing imagery of each projector with music. Props that could be moved around and projected onto also had to be coordinated. Instead of attempting to jump right into designing a performance stage for RSVP, it made sense to first begin hands-on experimentation with these techniques on a smaller scale. The final senior show seemed to be the perfect venue to experiment. Knowing that I would have limited space to run my projections during the final show, I began looking into solutions where I could get projected images to cover large surfaces within a small footprint, as well as a solution where audiences could exhibit my installation without obstructing the path of projector beams. Having seen projectors implemented in a few art installations while visiting the Pompidou Center in Paris, France, I knew that arranging for beams to come from overhead worked quite successfully for minimizing projection obstruction, as well as allowed for an increased projection cone diameter to projection distance ratio when placed up high. From here I began to devise ways in which projector beam paths could stay clear of audience obstruction, allow for maximum projection diameter, and be adjustable to adapt to wherever the final senior thesis presentation may take place. Around the same time, I was exposed to a compilation of art installations in the form of a book called Tactile, where I saw how cardboard could be used as a cheap and light building material. The material lends itself to sort of loose aesthetic, almost in the way that a hand-drawn illustration could be described as sketchy. It can be made to take on many forms and be handcrafted without the use of heavy-duty tools, such as saws and drills. Because of these reasons, the potential for the division of labor when working with cardboard is highly advantageous. RSVP usually does not have a shortage of crew members, but often has a very tight budget to work with. I imagine that with some careful design work, templates for props could be produced and distributed to common crew members to be cut and assembled. Coincidentally, just as projector and cardboard construction began to take off, an open room within the department was graciously opened up for student use, just in time to begin testing and building presentation elements at full scale. By the 5th week, stacks of reclaimed cardboard had been collected from furniture and appliance stores from around San Luis Obispo County, and construction of cardboard props began. Concurrently, a few other side projects worked their way into my schedule, not to mention the studio workspace. As a few people know, my gig for RSVP was a result of my involvement in the music department. For this quarter, my music minor required that I compose a full composition and coordinate musicians to rehearse throughout the quarter. My musicians and I were to perform the piece at a concert scheduled for the end of the quarter, which happened to be the same exact night of the final thesis presentation, so there's absolutely no free time to be wasted this quarter. With only 2 or 3 weeks remaining before the night of the final show, we were able to secure a venue for our final exhibition. A fellow classmate and I were assigned a much more sizable space than originally planned for, and with a few rough dimensions recorded, we began to plan the layout of our exhibition space. Despite the fact that there is very little time until the final show, this was when I realized that it was possible to not only demonstrate projection techniques proposed for RSVP, but also exhibit a few proposed spatial design ideas as well. The idea was to demonstrate on a life-scale experiential level what it might be like entering the Performing Arts Center on the night of the RSVP premiere, using proposed methods of spatial sequencing, lighting, and user anticipation and unveiling methods. The proposed plan for the presentation room called for custom-built walls to be brought in to serve 2 purposes. They'd function as projection surfaces, as well as delineate a path for user entry. With extremely little time to waste on hesitation, I jumped right into the construction of 2 10-foot by 7-foot frames made to fit within the presentation space. It was decided that if cardboard props were to be projected onto, it was best that all other projection surfaces would be a cardboard texture as well, as to provide a uniform amount of reflectivity and color balance across all objects. The proposed plan also required that multiple projectors could be run off of one computer and synced up by video and audio. Therefore, I invested in a piece of hardware called the Matchbox Triple Head to Go, which could allow my laptop to do so. As it came down to the last few days, I was wrapping up the construction of an articulated arm designed to extend unobstructed projector beams into the presentation space. It was built cheap from found materials, such as a surveying tripod, a pole which had previously held a pivoting loudspeaker at the head, construction flashing, and reclaimed hardware. Crucial components include the articulated arm, which secures a 3-foot by 4-foot mirror at the top, the secondary arm, which allows it to lock in place as well as adjust the angle of the mirror, and a frame, which holds a projector in place on the body of the articulated arm. The angle of projection and height of the projector are also fully adjustable. When it came down to the day to move our projects into the presentation space, we were sleep deprived, sick, and disoriented. Yet there was still tons of moving of equipment to be done that night, so with the hopes that we would be able to continue working once we moved in, my studio mate and I set out at sunset. Once we got the U-Haul, moving in ended up taking much longer than we were prepared for. Just moving our projects from studio into the U-Haul alone, not to mention a few components of several of our other classmates' projects, took until 11 p.m. that evening. You could only imagine the time it took to not only unload at the venue, but to organize, reassemble all the walls, projectors, mirrors, cables and sound equipment, lights, and so on. Getting back to work where we left off was out of the question at that point. We ended up completely throwing out much of the original lighting and experiential layout plans, since some of the walls we relied on being there had been torn down, and in order to adapt, much of what I put together ended up being improvised from the components I did have. I could not help but be a little bit stressed, as the coming day was the big day for both my landscape architecture career as well as for my musical career. The next afternoon, after not having slept for days, some bad shit really went down. But luckily, when my walls literally came crumbling down around me, toppling cardboard props and tearing projection surfaces, some friends from out of town who were there to see my project and performance were able to help me repair and rectify things just in time for the show. And as I rushed out of the venue to run to my next performance, I was relieved to arrive and find a well-rehearsed group of musicians waiting there patiently for my arrival. The performance that night was excellent, and I have to say, thanks to the competency of my musicians, we were easily a crowd favorite. Not bad for preparing all this time on top of a senior project.
Grand, you getting it done?
Yeah, we're just finishing repairing stuff right now. So.
Alright.
Thanks to all my friends here.
Alright.
I think there are important lessons to be learned from this quarter. Sometimes I just get far too ambitious with my goals, and I often pay the price for making things harder on myself. It would be much easier if I just did what was expected of me, like turn in assignments on paper, or dedicate all of my time to only one single interest in my life. That would be easier. I should probably learn how to just slow down every once in a while and take a look around, because I really won't be here and slow for very much longer.
Probably reminded that at 23 already decided on a successful career, but not exactly what it's gonna be. But don't wanna look back and see an overgrown trail I coulda, shoulda blazed Everglades of a missed opportunity. So I'ma hit the trail and I'ma go hard. Nikon on my side, I'ma shoot at the stars. Moleskin and a felt tip pen to keep my thoughts intact. Got a strap attached to the guitar on my back. I got aspirations, so many, so I get no vacations. Ironically, no time for me, so every once in a while I gotta slow down, take a look around, slow town.